And we are live. Welcome to another episode of Business Focus Live with me, John, where we talk about business related topics as well as news from here and around the world. If you're new to this channel, don't forget to subscribe and let's get started. I forgot to switch my screen. Take two. Anyway, welcome to another episode of Business Focus Live with me, John, where we talk about business related topics as well as news from here and around the world. If you're new to this channel, don't forget to subscribe and let's get started. And we're back. Thank you again for joining me today. Big boo boo at the start of the stream. Anyway, I didn't. I pressed already record and I didn't switch the screen from the intro part to the main screen here. Anyway, so for this week, there are a lot of things that have happened this past week. First and foremost, we're going to talk about the European Championship or the Euro 2020. We have several Chinese companies that are sponsoring the event. And what's the reason? What's the benefit? We'll talk about that in a bit. Next is some concerning, tragic news regarding a condominium in Florida that suddenly collapsed. So what led to this? We'll dig deeper as to what the cause here and could this have been avoided and so forth. Next is since people businesses or countries have reopened their borders so people could travel again, whether domestically or even internationally, and yet there are concerns regarding safety factors regarding boarding a plane and so forth. The next, the people who are tasked of taking care of people who are traveling, riding airplanes and whatnot. You have the pilot, and here we have today's article regarding flight attendants having to deal more than the usual with regards to passenger aggression. So we'll talk about that. Later on, we'll be talking about some local news regarding, uh, the construction of the bridge between connecting Binondo area as well as in Intramuros, Manila. So we'll talk about that and some concerns also regarding, Taal volcano, which erupted last year, which was kind of scary, especially for people who live within the area. And now the Batangas city is not the city itself, but Philvox, which is in charge of raising the level. It's now at the heightened level of level alert level 3, which is you know there were signs of eruptions. So we'll talk about that later on. And finally, for our last topic, we'll be talking about I like technology. If it's a good technology that needs to be broadcast and shared, I'm all for it. So we have now an improved and more faster fast charger that is going to charge your phone even faster for about 10 minutes or so. So stay tuned for that part as well. Anyway, so for our first topic, as mentioned, so why are Chinese companies in particular? You have uh, Hisense, you have TikTok, Alipay, just to name a few, who are going to sponsor the event for the UEFA Championship or the Euro 2020, where several football teams from around the world are competing to European countries in particular, sorry, who are vying to win the European Championship for this year and so forth. Now, question is, why are those companies pushing to spend money to get visibility here? So let's take a closer look here. So as mentioned, so companies are trying to reach overseas market. Obviously, those companies we mentioned are a global brand, more so TikTok rather than Hisense. But Hisense is a very popular brand already in terms of manufacturing of television sets and so forth. Actually, I was planning of buying a new television set and I was considering something very inexpensive brand, and Hisense came to mind. So obviously they're trying to reach a global stage, not just dominating in their domestic market in China, so they can create more prestige and more awareness for shoppers around the world. Now, Obviously, they're just not there to showcase their brand, but also be able to push, bring awareness to their consumer Chinese market in around the world, but also hopefully even other citizens, other nations would recognize the viability of their products, similar maybe how Huawei started out, right? Used to be there were only Apple and Samsung as the main brand or choice for smartphones. Then slowly but surely, Huawei built up their reputation in terms of reliability, in terms of jam-packed features and so forth, which was able to capture a significant market at that time at their peak. And I think companies like Hisense is doing the same thing here. So it opens up new market, and obviously, particularly, that's why they're trying to reach out to the Euro Championships so that they can target the European market here, whether in London, Spain, Switzerland, or any countries that are participating in the championships here. Now, what's interesting here, the company is based in Qingda- Qingdao, I don't know if I pronounce it correctly, Shandong province. So hopefully by 2025, they're aiming for overseas market to generate half of their total revenue, which is about $24 billion. So that's triple what they are generating compared to last year. And obviously, they've been trying to push for a larger market share in the European for almost more than a decade ago. So meaning it has big potential. Obviously, dominating in your local market is important before you can even consider expanding your business globally in other regions. And they're now boasting some 8,000 employees worldwide with offices ranging in Germany, also in Spain, just to name a few. And it's not just them. So you have another company, Vivo, a smartphone manufacturer. I think they're on the same boat category as Oppo to a lesser extent, and Xiaomi and so forth, has entered the European countries in terms of being able to generate a substantial market hold in the region. And other companies that are participating here that we have, let me see. You have Alipay, which is owned by Alibaba. You have also TikToks, which is owned by ByteDance, are some of the companies that are showcasing or investing a lot in their marketing so to gain more exposure with the European market here. And obviously, why the Euro 2020 of all sports? Now, there could be uh, other sporting events like maybe the National Basketball Association, you have the American Football League, and soccer and so forth, or even the hockey or even baseball. Now, obviously, the selling point if you're trying to target the European countries is you need to focus on what sports that people are are glued in to watch, and the European Championship boasts some 2 billion people to watch live telecast. So obviously, if you're a supporter of a particular country, a lot of eyeballs are watching those games live. And couple that the excitement, especially the known athletes who are participating, from Cristiano Ronaldo to Lionel Messi, just to name a few, it gets a lot of hype and recognition, and viewers watching those games live. And what's interesting here, Alipay, one of the Chinese companies as mentioned, has tied up a partnership for 8 year to an 8 year partnership. So which would conclude by you have 2020 and then 2024 Euro Championship. So the worth is somewhat around 200 million euros, or almost 240 million dollars. Now, that may seem a lot for many companies, but obviously you're investing there. No company would spend millions or hundreds of millions of dollars without any return, with their expectation, obviously, to generate more awareness, so that you know when companies put up shop in those regions, people would already know who Alipay is, or even Hisense. Obviously, TikTok is well known in the social media platform and so forth. Now, is 8 year considered a long term deal here? Well, I think it's calculated risk here, and obviously in I think in the National Football League, they have a 10-year partnership with those television networks in the United States, and some even spend the north of billions of dollars. So it's a very lucrative industry, or sports, if you look at it that way. Now, obviously, those are the benefits of partnering with companies, with sports events, so that you generate more revenue for the businesses and more awareness for your brand and so forth. Now, what are the downsides? Now, obviously, according to the article here, you have CNBC stating that there's risk regarding the involvement of China. Obviously, many companies are always tied up with CCP government. Now, whether there will be any ulterior motive or not, who's to say? But at the end of the day, the point here is for those companies to grow, they need to expand their reach. And does China bring any certain type of risk? Obviously, any business, any country always involves that. And obviously, for the UEFA, which owns the Euro 2020 for this year, deemed it not as important or not as risky. Obviously, the hundreds of millions investing in their platform, or investing in their partnership, is lucrative enough to maybe not consider it as a risky endeavor. Only time can tell. And obviously, a lot of people are going to watch it, so it's going to be a win-win for both parties here. Anyway, next we have, as I mentioned earlier, so in Florida, of all places, when I read this article, I was surprised to find out that, a severe case of a building, in this case, a condominium, collapsed out of thin air, so to speak, or maybe there's a more serious situation happening here. So, according to the article in Insider.com, the article states that the land around Florida Condo that collapsed was showing signs of sinking, according to a 2020 study. So, meaning there have been reports that there was a problem with regards to that particular condominium. Now, obviously, Florida is surrounded by bodies of water. Now, question here is, is it an isolated incident, or should the city be concerned, as this might affect other facilities, other condominiums? So, let's take a closer look. So, as you can see here in the photo, so, the total devastation, I think, according to the latest update, there were 100 victims that was discovered, and there were more. I think as of present, there are almost 150 people now, which is kind of sad. Meaning, this tragedy could have been avoided, or is this a freak accident that could not have been avoided here? But anyway, so there was a research done that shows that the ground around the building have moved. Now, obviously, movement for a building is not always good, because it's not just collapse, but if there's a big earthquake, could collapse be the only problem here, or maybe structural damage and so forth. But if you look at the building here, it looks pretty old. I'm not sure if it's how many years already, or how many decades has it been existing, considering that it's not a very skyrise condominium. I think it has less than 20 floors or 10 floors. Let me see. Yeah, less than 20 floors. And it's sad to see that, half of the buildings suddenly collapsed for no reason. And what's interesting, other buildings within that facility, if you notice the surrounding area, was not affected. So, meaning it only applied to that particular condominium. So, meaning tough luck for those people who got affected. Anyway, according to Widoniski, who is a university professor, he talked about that measures subsistence, or when we see movement of a building, it's worth checking why it happens. Now, obviously, why a collapse suddenly occurred has to be thoroughly investigated, so to speak, whether is it man-made or natural causes. If it's natural causes, how do you avoid it in the future? And then if it's man-made, meaning fault from the builders, from the city that allowed it to be housed, to be utilized for occupancy, should be thoroughly vetted here. Anyway, so according to Widowinski, he mentions that the land was subsiding was more likely to experience more serious effects of sea level rise due to climate crisis now. Is it more on external factors rather than man-made factors? So, we have to do some further investigation. So what's interesting here? So the facility here was constructed 80s, 90s, 2000. So almost 4 or 5 decades ago, way back in the 1981. So it was based on reinforced concrete, but it passed. What's interesting, it passed roof inspection a day before it collapsed. So meaning, a lot of things has to be thoroughly checked in terms of the government's measures. Was it sufficient? Was there lacking negligence? All of those things, because a lot of people were affected from this. Not just the people who died from it, but the families that were affected. So this is kind of concerning, especially for a or urbanized place like in Florida here. Uh, Hopefully they could find what the real cause is, and I'll keep everyone updated with regards to this issue. So, it's kind of concerning. I can't imagine if that were to happen here in our country. Hopefully it hasn't happened. So, unless I think the last time that there was a landslide was due to an earthquake that happened decades ago in the 90s. Yeah, there was long time ago, and there was a collapse. I think somewhere in Baguio, I think. Anyway, so next we have, speaking of dealing with hardship, used to be being on a flight attendant is a dream job where many people actually, I dreamt of being one when I was still younger. Nowadays with the pandemic and people resuming, traveling abroad or traveling anywhere elsewhere, flight attendants have to deal with unprecedented violence, according to the article here, as travel returns and passengers' aggression soars. So, according to the article here at businessinsider.com, it mentions that one of those flight attendants, experienced an aggressive passenger who was intoxicated from drinking alcohol, and then she was she was told that if I had the Black Lives Matter shirt, this would not be a problem. Now, obviously, the person is intoxicated, may not be thinking properly. But again, the aggression can escalate. Can obviously imagine that, thousands of miles up in the sky, and then you're confined in a small space, then dealing with several people, not just one or multiple people, and doing this for several hours at a time, especially for long haul flights. It's getting to a point that's becoming more less attractive, more worrisome than one would assume. Anyway, so let's take a closer look. So as mentioned here, to the point that the airline had to call for police to remove that passenger from the aircraft. So it's getting to that point. It used to be that you could talk to person, settle them down, and then continue with the flight. And it's not just this isolated incident. So the incidents are increasing across the country, where flight attendants have to deal with the rise of passenger aggression. Now, obviously, the aggression and violence stems from the policy or the mandatory of wearing face masks. Do we need to wear it? Do we need to be consensus regarding other people's safety? Now, obviously, in the United States, it's different than compared to other countries. So, some may say as long as the government says it's not required, then you can remove it. But obviously, for an airline where you are cramped with several people, those policies may change depending on the airlines here. And obviously, the brunt of those tension, the flight attendant has to deal with it, which is kind of unfair if you think about it. So obviously, the government has to step in, or even the airline companies themselves. If we want to book a flight with our airlines, you have to follow strict policies. If there is indeed a strict policy regarding, wearing face masks, or do you have to be vaccinated, all of those nitty gritty details before you even arrive in the aircraft, so forth, so that the flight attendant can only focus on ensuring you enjoy uh, you have an enjoyable experience during your flight rather than dealing with this other issues that's technically not their fault. They're just implementing what's being uh, told by the upper management here. And obviously, since January 2021 or this early this year, the Federal Aviation Administration has received a staggering amount. So more than or a little over 2,500 reports. So 2,500 reports of unruly behavior by passengers. Now, that may not seem a lot, but still, if you're inside an aircraft, jam packed with other people, that can instigate a lot of, to the point of riot. So hopefully not, but obviously it brings a lot of stress to those people who are working for a living, especially for those flight attendant. Assuming they're trying to do their job, and added burden of dealing with this stress is obviously not helpful, to the extent of people, attendants leaving their job, some even at worst committing suicide to that extent. So question is, what are the airlines supposed to do? What can they do to help and avoid this to begin with? Obviously, you don't want to remove passengers all of a sudden, but there has to be a certain standard or policy in place to protect the interests of the airline, the passengers, even the flight stewards, or even the pilot themselves. And obviously, the flight attendants are bearing the brunt of the passengers' aggression, which is kind of unfair, right? Obviously, you have two sides to a coin. Obviously, you have the passenger side; they have their rights that they want to exercise. Then, obviously, the flight steward or the attendant has their job at stake here. If they don't follow, they might get fired and so forth, right? And what was extreme here, an example that happened: a flight steward from Southwest Airlines lost two teeth from an assault of a passenger. That's how extreme, flying, riding, traveling, from one place to another. So this is kind of concerning, and if this is not addressed quickly, things can go out of hand quickly, and no one wants to travel if that's going to be the experience. Imagine if you have kids traveling with you, right? It's one thing if it's just adults traveling, and if you have kids, let's say you have pregnant moms traveling, you could just imagine. And it was mentioned also there were three flight attendants who were part of they called it therapy or therapy. It's an acronym. Who died by suicide because of the stress of it. Now, whether it's related due to the stress of the flight or maybe because of the pandemic, maybe scared of losing a job, and so forth, the uncertainty. But still, it all compounds those problems, and it doesn't help anyone. You don't enjoy the flight. The the workers, the attendants are dealing with it as best as they can. Maybe the company can do something about it so that these things does not proceed over time. You can just imagine the stress you have to deal if it's a long haul flight, especially if it's 12 hours, 16 hours, or even longer than that. And what's interesting here is obviously being a flight attendant is what many want to do, especially if you enjoy traveling. And even though it has its ups and downs, that's part of the job. But now, according to a New York City-based flight attendant, she mentions that the constant anxiousness, the worriness of the job that it entails, whether it's worth it to do it anymore. Now, obviously, if you rely on that job, then you have no choice but to continue. But still, can companies do something about it? Looking at those CEOs, obviously these are your frontliners that deals with your customers. And if your customer doesn't have a great experience, they might not come back and you know choose your airline as their next viable option. Actually, there were options that was mentioned that there was an off-duty attendant who was taken to a hospital due exhibiting signs of mental illness when assaulted, you know, when they were assaulted on a flight. So you could just imagine, traveling in the sky who used to be a glamorous job now could be considered a dangerous job all of a sudden. Hopefully it doesn't get too extreme to a point that people would think twice if traveling is still safe, not just the airplane itself, but the people who are inside traveling with you. Anyway, next, for some local news. So we were talking about earlier that I happened to chance upon a construction last Sunday. I was out with my family. We were on a road trip, and I was supposed to go. Where was it? I was around in City Hall, supposed to drop by somewhere in Escolta, in Binonda, and along Jones Bridge. When I was passing through, I saw a bridge that was being constructed. Little did I know it was the bridge that was funded by the China Philippines partnership here. So the bridge that is being constructed is supposed to link the Binondo area as well as the Intramuros. So it's the Binondo Intramuros Bridge that they're calling it. Now, so far, it's still under construction, but it's more than half completed. So, so hopefully they could finish it by end of the year here. So you can see it here. So you can see here it connects. The left side is part of the Binondo area, and the right side is where Intramuros is. So I was curious to see if they're for what purpose. Now, it mentions here in the article in pna.gov or .gov.ph, they mentioned the project which cost a staggering a little over 3 billion pesos, which is funded as mentioned by China, which is a partnership with the DPWH or Department of Public Works and Highways to connect those two locations. Now, it has a viaduct structure and a ramp over Estero de Binondo that has a length of 418 meters. And then you have from Binondo up ramp on Muelle de la Industria Street at Binondo side that spans 298 meters. Also, you have a 191-meter up ramp at Magallanes Riverside Drive and a 164-meter down ramp on Solana Street in Intramuros. So they're connecting from both sides here. And the purpose here, according to the article is mentioned, is to carry the extra traffic, around 30,000 vehicles per day. Obviously, if you're traversing, typically if you're from in Binondo area, if you're trying to get to City Hall, you have to pass through Escolta. And if you know the narrow road there, it's always congested. I try to avoid it as much as possible unless you're traveling there during weekends, especially on Sundays, where it's technically a ghost town there. So that it will decongest parts of different areas in Binondo, whether it in Escolta as well as in Delpan, where it has connections to the pier, Manila Pier in the south area here. Now, obviously, the project is a way to improve, to lessen the dilemma of the traffic gridlock in major parts of the Manila here. So there are also projects constructing new bridges crossing Pasig, as well as in Marikina Rivers and Mangahan Floodway. So, obviously we need a lot of resources to be able to do that. Question is, where are the budgets for where are taxes going? Aren't supposed to be our taxes going to those projects rather than other countries funding our projects? Kind of fishy. Anyway, the funded was a grant from the People's Republic of China. Thank you. So the arch bridge design symbolizes the friendly cooperation between Philippines and China. But the sad question is, why do we have to rely on other countries, right? Where are all our taxes going to? Shouldn't DPWH be the one, sorry, DPWH, but our Congress saving those money to construct our own facility, and rather than asking other companies, or in this case other countries, to build our infrastructure, which is in dire need of improvements and expansion. So anyway, continuing on local news still, we mentioned earlier regarding Taal volcano. Now, obviously, there was an eruption that happened last year, which was kind of scary. Well, again, concerns has been raised by the field folks, according to Rappler.com, regarding the alert level because of a what do you call it? Preto-magmatic eruption. So any eruption, I think, is not good, and they have recent the alert level to level 3, which used to be level 2. So let's see here. So as mentioned, it was just changed or placed under level 3, alert level 3, just this past Thursday, because of the preto-magmatic eruption. I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly. And as you can see here, any type of eruption that shows you this types of explosion is not good. And you can just imagine if this were the same level as how Mount Pinatubo erupted, where it reached all the way from the northern part of the Luzon area all the way here in Metro Manila. It's kind of scary, and obviously, especially people who are living within the area. So people have to be evacuated. And question is, can we predict it? When will it erupt? Or are we living on a ticking time bomb here? Anyway, according to the Philippine Institute of Volcanology and Seismology, or PhilVox, they stated that the Taal's main crater generated a short-lived dark preto-magmatic. So even though it's short-lived, but still, it's kind of scary, right? Any type of explosion in a volcano is never a good thing, right? It plumed 1 kilometer high. So that's pretty yeah, 1 kilometer high. It's still tall, right? Anyway, so when you say preto-magmatic eruption, it pertains to an eruption that involves a magma and water, which typically interact, and it has explosive, reaction, as you can see in the photo here. So obviously, it's never a good sign when you say eruption and magmatic, put them together. And if there's a magmatic intrusion in the main crater, obviously there are it can further drive succeeding eruptions. So meaning it's not a one-time event. There could be more. And question is, will it be more explosive? And if it's more explosive, are we prepared to deal with this? Now, obviously, last year it was, I won't say an anomaly, but a lot of people were caught unprepared, especially those people who live within the area. And question is, what are local government doing here? Because obviously the PhilVox can only do so much, prepare or warn people, but obviously you have to have local government step in, or LGUs, to prepare those people. Where's the evacuation center? What are people supposed to do? And yada yada, all of those details, because you don't want another, incursion wherein people are in panic mode, looking for people left and right, doing regular stuff where they should be staying indoors and so forth. And obviously, right now, according to PhilVox, they are recommending Taal Volcano Island and other high-risk barangays within Agoncillo, Laurel in Batangas to be evacuated. So obviously, being within those surrounding areas, obviously Taal Volcano surrounds a large portion of Batangas area, right? Parts of Laguna, parts of Batangas area here. So everyone needs to be aware, and governments, or in this case local government, has to be updated and be prepared for the worst case scenario. We don't want to wait that worst case scenario, then that's the time we react. And so as of right now, so everyone needs to be reminded that Taal Volcano Island is a permanent danger zone. So no tourists, no traveling to Tagaytay to overlook the Taal volcano, because you might get stuck if indeed the eruption were to occur, and if it gets worse. Hopefully, it does not happen again, but we can only hope for the best here, right? Anyway, so for our last story here, so I was talking about earlier regarding, I enjoy technology, and in particular the charging capability of our smartphones or our power brick, right? And obviously one of the downside of owning a smartphone, a lot of any tech tech device that you own, or even an iPad or a tablet, is for all of its benefits, the battery reliance that we have. If it drains out, you have to wait for hours at ends to be able to fully charge your device. And we're always looking either have a bigger battery capacity, or your charging capability could fast charge your device quickly. And many companies have been pushing, and the latest I think was Xiaomi's 120-watt charger, or 125, where it could charge your smartphone device in less than 20 minutes, which is kind of astonishing. So we're getting to that point that improving technology, hopefully in just a few minutes, once you plug in, just like refueling your gas tank, in just a few minutes you can plug it in, and then bring it with you, and then go where you need to be. So it wouldn't be a cumbersome ordeal anymore. Now, a company now who is introducing a 160-watt fast charger, it's called Infinix. Is it Infinix? Yeah, Infinix concept way back early this year. Yeah, the 2021 concept phone. So it's an Uber ultra fast charging. So significantly much powerful than what Xiaomi was offering. Now, obviously, fast charging can only get you so far because even though it charges fast, the problem is the heat it generates. So, no matter how fast you can generate it or let's say top it up, the question is the heat. Because if it's too hot, and if it damages your battery, then it will not be useful in a long period of time. It can shorten the lifespan of your battery, or even worse, affect your device itself, which is kind of concerning. But but according to the article here at androidauthority.com, the company is stating that they have found a way to mitigate the heat issue and be able to top off your device within just 10 minutes, which is pretty remarkable if you think about it. So let's see here. So as I mentioned, they're boasting a industry leading of 160 watt power, and they can charge a phone from empty to full within just 10 minutes. Okay. Now compare that to other brands. You have Apple's, they only have 20-watt charger. You have Samsung 25-watt charger, then OnePlus has 65. Then you also have Xiaomi that has 120 or 25. I forgot which one. But the point here is technology is improving over time here. And one of their key rationales or key ingredients is obviously the first is the supercharged pump that they're calling it. So which offers up to 98.6% smartphone energy charging conversion. So meaning there's minimal power and heat waste inside the handset. So the transfer energy is being maximized here. So combine that with 60 different integrated safety triggers that can apparently shut down your charging based on the status of the charging cable. So if it becomes too hot, so you're using your, I don't know if they're going to use a proprietary USB-C cable, but they have to use a USB-C cable, cannot be micro USB, so that it can handle the increased wattage of transfer from the outlet to your device here. They also mentioned that their pack contains an 8C battery, or C rate pertains to the internal resistance and the ability to handle high charge and discharge currents from a given capacity. So charge, dissipate, something like that. So it offers as much as almost 20%, 18% lower internal resistance compared to a 6C cell here. So you have Oppo who's offering 125-watt charging solution. So in this case, Infinix is offering a way to monitor the battery temperature and keep it under tolerable heat, under 40 centigrade or 104 Fahrenheit. So obviously heat is another key component. Fast charging on one side, maintaining tolerable heat is an important part. And if you can put it together, you have a tremendous product to offer for the market here. So they mentioned that the charging plug supports universal USB power delivery and USB power delivery PPS up to 100 watts. Then you have USB power delivery that runs 5 to 15 volts, 3 amps, as well as 20 volts, 5 amps, and offers, while offering PPS scalable voltage from 3.6 volts to 20 volts up to 5.1 amps of current. So meaning 160 watt charger can fast charge your smartphone, in particular the S21, which only uses 25 watts. Now, obviously for my part, it's not just the smartphone that I'm concerned that I want it to be able to charge it quickly, but also that more so the laptops, because laptops requires a large amount of battery pack and it requires a big power brick. And if you could just bring one power brick for multifunction use, to charge your phone, to charge your laptop, and so for all of your devices in one, then you're willing to pay a substantial amount for this one. Now, how much are they going to charge this? We still don't know. Anyway, so according to their test, so it can fully charge a phone that has 4,000 milliamps of battery in just 10 minutes. And compared that to Xiaomi's 120 watt charger, it takes them twice as much, so around 21 minutes for a 4500. So it has higher capacity. So, but still, the time it takes longer, so to speak. So question is, which company will be able to come up with a solid product that is ready for consumption or use for the general public here? Now, obviously, at the end of the day, is this something that you would consider? I would seriously consider this if it's readily available and it's not too pricey. If it's just a couple thousand of bucks, If it's more than 10,000, I don't think it would be worth it. But we have to wait and see once they release it to the market for actual public consumption here. Obviously, the improvement of technology with more efficient power cells, and then the improvement of ensuring that heat dissipates rather than overheating will always be a key factor in finding the optimal solution. And can just imagine if they can translate this power charging capability not just on laptops, smartphones, but in electric vehicles, so that the issue which is many are apprehensive of adopting is you know having to wait hours on it to be able to fully charge a electric vehicle. If you just have to wait a few minutes, similar how you'd top up your gas in a gas station, then I think a lot of people would really seriously considering shifting from a combustible engine to a electric powered engine here. Anyway, I think that concludes our discussion for today. Thanks again for watching. So for more business news, stay here with Business Focus. As always, I'll see you again next week, same time, same channel. Stay safe and take care.